Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of The Niche Cast. We are from theniche-cage.com, and we've got a full menu of Aotearoa sporting goodness today. As a warm-up kōrero here, Wildcard, I do want to just catch your vibe with the bro, Sean Marks, because we've enjoyed a lot of his mahi over recent years, and I'm at a point where he's either making a lot of weird moves and I'm not really enjoying a lot of the moves, or he is a pawn to someone else's dictating his moves, and that is equally as icky as making a couple of bad moves. So how are you feeling about Sean Marks at the Brooklyn Nets? And for folks who are listening, you can find all the stuff that's been happening with Brooklyn Nets recently, and if going back months, maybe a year or so as well. We're just here to just catch the vibe with Sean Marks.
Yeah, I don't know, because icky's a good word. It's been strange to see how a lot of that's going on. Some of it is like his hands are tied, and like they made a gamble a few years ago on Irving and Durant, and like they did stand up to, like, he didn't give Kyrie Irving the multi-year extension that he wanted, and then Irving opted into his last year contract option for like 36 million a year, and no other team was going to take that on. So they didn't have a choice but to deal with the fact that he's out there retweeting weird movies and then not like just getting really frisky with media when questioned about that and just doing weird stuff. But there's two different sides of things, because that's off court dramas, which is like, well, he can't do much about that other than try to like put out fires afterwards. You can't. He's in a situation where Kyrie Irving has to play for the Nets this year. They can't change that. And there's like already lingering dramas from some of the like personnel type stuff last year where everyone was just bummed out the whole time. Like, you can't do that much about that. There's also the issue, which is that they're losing lots of basketball games, which is an on-court issue and kind of a separate thing. That's why Steve Nash has been fired, and I'm not surprised by that, because Nash should have been under pressure for a team that didn't deliver, even though it's been a tough job for him. Kind of don't think Mark's had a choice, though. Like, even sometimes if you think a dude is like a good mate and can be a good coach, it's like, well, if he's lost the dressing room, he's lost the dressing room. Like, you might be a good coach, but you got to go somewhere else to prove it. This is not happening here. And sometimes you just got to make that big like psychic change kind of thing. Like, that had to be done. The Ime Udoka hiring makes sense in some areas, because he used to be an assistant for Brooklyn. So he's worked with a lot of these players and also the organization. He's worked with Ben Simmons before with Philly. He was a successful coach. They went to the finals last year. Like, there's a lot of good, and he's in that Sean Mark. I can't remember which one it was, but he had some relationship with Sean Marks going back a while. It might have even been when they were players, or like something. I can't remember what it was. It was something in there. They've worked together before. But he's also just suspended, like, year-long suspension from the Celtics for some devious actions that we don't actually know what they are, which makes things even weird. Like, there might be that it's just a privacy thing and it's not quite as bad as it's played out to. We don't know what the situation is, but that's why you don't really do that like right now. So the vibe check is that it's all strange, and it feels like there's information that we don't have as the public, which is why everything looks awful. Like, it's not a great thing to sit back and watch, but it also means it's impossible to try predict, like what you said. Is this Marks just making crazy decisions, or is there logic behind this, or is he just being told what to do, or like, I don't know right now. It's where it gets strange.
I appreciate your defense of Sean Marks. He sets the culture. He sets the tone. He sets what the boundaries of what can and can't do in that can and can't be done in that organization. So all of this, like you say, a lot of it isn't his fault, or like it's not necessarily his doing.
It was, if it's his fault, it's his fault from decisions made like 3 years ago, sort of thing, that he can't change now, is I guess more to the point.
I believe he has played a strong part in not setting a winning culture at the Brooklyn Nets, in allowing stuff to happen, and that's what's icky.
Yeah,
Is everything starts at the top, and he's second to the owner, so it could be the owner but he's not there day to day, I don't believe, setting the culture. Sean Marks is, and everything he has done has led them to this point. The decisions he has made in signing people, allowing people to do what they want, allowing certain freedoms, and I would like to compare him to Eugene Behrman. Behrman's a coach, but there is a video, shout out to Combat TV, they do a fantastic job of covering city kickboxing. There's an interview with Eugene Behrman ahead of their Madison Square, funnily enough, in New York. Fight card coming up, Israel Adesanya versus Pereira. And he's just breaking down how this is like pretty much the most ruthless fight camp they've ever done. Obviously, they always say that, but he's basically said some of maybe folks just got a bit big for their boots, and they had to strip it back and let them know who's boss, who runs the show. And that was their preparation for this upcoming UFC card. And I'm a big fan of city kickboxing culture. And there is a significant difference between those actions and what Sean Marks has allowed to fester. And when I wrote about city kickboxing culture, I used the culture yogurt, bacteria growing, microbiome type of shit example. And that's good for you. You can make yogurt out of it. You can do a whole lot of shit. You can make sourdough bread if you've got the right culture. Sean Marks has allowed a Brooklyn Nets culture to fester. And when you allow things to fester, it leads to what's happening right now. So, I don't know, do you want to keep defending Sean Marks, or?
A little bit, because I think there was some stuff in the offseason where he did put his foot down, like not giving Irving the extension, not trading Durant. Like there's been sort of played out, like they didn't get the haul they wanted in return for Durant, which is why they didn't trade him. I think they didn't want to trade him.
Kevin Durant wanted him fired. He wanted him
gone.
I
know that's frisky.
You can't let that shit fester.
They negotiated some of that, like they've spoken about it. Durant said we've all moved on, kind of thing. I take Durant at his word. I wouldn't necessarily do so with Kyrie. But the point is, I think what you said is true. There's bad shit was allowed to fester. This has happened in the Brooklyn Nets. How do you clean that up afterwards, though? Because the option is either you throw everything away and start again, but that means going back to square one, which he's done before once, but it was very difficult. The alternative is you try to make it work with Durant and Irving, and you get really delicate about chemical balances and trying to figure things out. At least try to make it work with Durant, if not Irving. He's probably one and done in terms of like the last year of his contract. I think that's part of this, is there's like a push and pull between the old and trying to change things. I think he's also, it's his biggest strength as a GM is that he's big on compromise, and he wants to work with people, and he wants to try find, rather than my way and the highway, he wants to try find ways that work for everyone. But it's difficult to do that when you started off by just letting the players do whatever they want. And now instead of making it feel like it's 50-50 on both sides, the players feel like they're just having 50% of their power ripped away from them. I think that's the struggle that's going on right now. I don't know if he can solve it. I don't know if anyone in the world could solve it, but I think that's kind of part of where he's stuck at, is this in-between phase, which see how that goes, because it's a bit ugly at the moment.
That in-between phase is a luxury, because most people in his position don't have the opportunity to solve it, right? Like they're already out the door.
He's lucky he had a coach he could fire instead as the scapegoat.
The
Because
best
he's
way
next. Like, if that doesn't work, they're not going to just fire Ime Udoka. It'll be him. Like, you'll move to the dude who's been there the whole time and say, well, Sean Marks, you've had your chance, kind of thing.
yes,
In which
a
case,
good
you'll
way.
probably just get a better job at a better organization. So that might not be the worst thing either.
Just return to the Spurs and actually get back
Yep,
into a
why
good
not?
culture. A good way of thinking of
Perfect
it,
timing for that, actually.
Sean Marks, right now he's got mold.
Yes.
And you're
That's
trying
it.
to tell me that he can turn mold into sourdough bread or probiotic yogurt. And I'm very interested to see if that happens, because I'm not sure about science, but don't think that works out. But it could.
Well, you got to throw the mold out. But has the mold contaminated the entire batch is what you're trying to figure out right now.
Welcome to
Which
the Niche
usually
Cast.
does. To be fair, it usually does.
Welcome to the Niche Cast. We are trying to figure things out and discuss Aotearoa sporting matters. Hit us up, theniche-case.com. Shout out to the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/our niche case. That is the best way to support the niche case and all of our content, podcasts, the blogs on the website, as well as the email banger via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Got a lot to discuss today, and some of the things we aren't discussing today I will be covering in the email tomorrow. So might be breaking down the Warriors SG Ball squad. Might be doing some Kiwi NRL junior notes for upcoming yarns. Also Plunkett Shield, another round this weekend as well. Kiwi Ferns had a good win this morning. So basically all those things I'll be writing about in tomorrow's email. I do want to publish a Kiwis preview, Kiwis versus Fiji preview for the website, theniche-case.com tomorrow as well. Any upcoming yarns or email teasers, Wildcard?
Well, whether I can get around to writing about them all is another thing. But I mean, there's a football Fern squad out. There's hoping for the last signing for the Wellington Phoenix women's team to be named soon. I'd love to finish the first Stephen Adams yarn of the season. There's all the National League and Flying Kiwi stuff is up live by this point when anyone's listening to it. So heaps of stuff.
That is everywhere. The niche-case.com, patreon.com/our niche case, and the email banger comes out every Monday and Friday via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Mindfulness. Vamos.
Mindfulness from Ramdas, because I haven't had a Ramdas one in a little while. And this one goes, the transformative process is our job, so that we are not ruled by fear, but by love.
Just got to keep working towards the love, Wildcard, and just want to keep it light and fluffy today. Not getting stuck down too deep in the mangroves with any one topic, because we've got a lot to discuss, and I'm trying to find the love in Kane Williamson. And I think a lot of people, some people, there is some Blackcaps fear. And we're just trying to transform ourselves through that fear into love. And I'm trying to find the love for Kane Williamson. You made a passionate defense of Sean Marks, and I don't want to hate on you too much there, because I think I'm in the same zone with Kane Williamson. And obviously the Blackcaps, they lost to England. That just felt like a blip on the radar type of performance. They should defeat Ireland tomorrow, Friday evening. And that should set them up for the semi-final, where they will be viewed as underdogs, as we discussed in the, might have been the Patreon podcast or the variety show earlier this week. How are you feeling about this Kane Williamson stuff, Wildcard? Because we have discussed it a lot, and I'm just like a bit of critical thinking with my own takes, my own ideas here. I just want to work through it. I still see his role as what he's doing right now. It's just weird when other people aren't necessarily doing their jobs. Conway and Allen haven't scored many runs in the last 2 games. Daryl Mitchell's come in and he hasn't quite had the same crispness to his innings as we've seen before. So I think there's a lot going on in that batting order, and Kane Williamson's just kind of holding his status quo without all the magic around him. Although Glenn Phillips he's fucking Ronald Weasley with the amount of wet magic he's dishing up these days. Crikey Jack. Another knock versus England. think he, yeah, just to give me a bit of Kane Williamson information. How are you feeling about Kane Williamson?
Yeah, I suspect a lot of the reaction is in light of that Ram Dass quote is what do we say, ruled by fear and not by love. And Williamson, like, it's a little bit of they lost the game, who do we blame kind of thing. But it has been an ongoing thing with Williamson, probably starting. I think from the Blackcaps perspective, most fans were like, it's the elbow injury kind of thing, no dramas there. I think in a 2020 perspective, it was the IPL where he had a similar thing where he scored a few runs, but not abundance of runs, and didn't score them very quickly.
So he had his lowest average of his 8-year career in the IPL, and also the lowest strike rate.
Which I think was a strike rate like under 100, wasn't it? Or
so he averaged
like
19 and he had a strike rate under 100, 96 or 98 or something.
Yeah, not ideal. Like, one of the things I've wondered about is statistically in 2020 cricket is like, because it's 120 deliveries in the thing. I think maybe the strike rate being based on 100 deliveries, like for 2020, why don't we just make that based on 120 deliveries? So you're looking at someone's innings and being like, if they faced every ball of this innings, what would the team score be, sort of thing. And a strike rate under 100 is obviously a team scoring less than 120. So that's not a good total. That's not going to get you very many places. Although it is a little bit misleading because you don't bat in isolation. Like, no one is ever going to face every single ball of the thing. And I think with that, because it's easy to look at Williamson and say he scored 40 off 40, I think it was. And again, we lost by 20 runs. If he scored 60 off 40, we win. 60 or 40 is not an impossible thing for someone who faces that many deliveries. You probably want a strike rate up around what's that, like 133 or something like that. You probably want something in that range. But Glenn Phillips was doing more than that, and they had a good partnership, and they lost a couple early wickets, and that was a necessary partnership. And it was behind the run rate. Like, it would be nice if they scored a bit quicker, particularly Williamson, because he was the one who can't tell Phillips to score quicker. He already was scoring quick. Like, if Williamson had scored 10 extra runs, then maybe that run rate when he gets the last 4 overs or whatever is a little less. But Daryl Mitchell, Jimmy Neesham were coming in to close the game with a set Glenn Phillips. You got 3 guys there who are very good hitters, and they didn't get the job done. Like, admittedly, they were needing like 10 to 12 runs and over at that point. It's very difficult against England, who have good death bowlers too, which is something we don't really experience. We haven't experienced that for a while. Most teams don't, to be fair. Most teams do go ballistic at the end of innings. England's death bowlers are good. Wokes and Curran and whatnot. And Daryl Mitchell was caught right on the boundary by a good catch from substitute fielder Chris Jordan, I think it was. There was some weird stuff with Dooley and whoever the English commentator was talking about fielding and Livingston versus Jordan. I had no idea what they were on about. Like, there's obviously an in-joke there about someone's fielding. But point being, good catch. Could easily have been 6. Like, they could have been 6. There could have been a spark that Daryl Mitchell's got that one away, and now he goes nuts from then on and leads the Blackcaps to victory. Like, they should have been in a more comfortable position. They were a bit slow in getting to that point, but part of that is because Conway and Allen didn't fire at the start. So I just find it hard to blame the dude who anchored the innings for the fact that they lost, because it wasn't ideal. It wasn't a perfect innings. I'm not out here to say Kane Williamson batted amazingly. He batted good enough so that the team had a chance to win it at the end, with other guys having got out. And neither Neesham nor Mitchell fired, and Phillips got out as well, trying to, impossibly save things once it started to get out of hand. So that's not Kane Williamson's fault. Ideally, he scores better, but it's not like he was, the thing I linger on the most from that game, and the reason I think they lost it, is because they dropped Joss Butler twice, which actually was Kane Williamson's fault, because he dropped the first one. So if you're going to blame Williamson for anything, blame him for that catch, which would have been a good catch, but he's still maybe a Blackcaps fielder at that level against a batter that good. You got to take that. You're going to blame Williamson for anything in that game, blame him for the drop catch. Don't blame him for an anchoring innings, which was not not a perfect innings by any margin, but also still got the team into a position where they could attack in the later overs with a chance of victory. Like he didn't bat them out of it or anything like that.
And like for the Blackcaps to be a factor at any international tournament, their fielding has to be the best.
Yeah,
so I think that is considering what we saw in the Tri Series. When the Blackcaps fielding isn't perfect, their chances of losing increase, because those are the margins when you're competing with all these teams are pretty good. India, England, Australia, Pakistan, New Zealand, South Africa, they're all good cricket teams. New Zealand, their advantages, I believe, are in the like intangibles, the mahi, the grey area, some of that's fielding, but they have to be near perfect for that to be like a winning factor. So I think that's just how you measure the Blackcaps. Like if they're dropping catches and there's like their fielding's below par, it's going to be tough for them to win. And obviously,
I'd almost say that about any team though. Like,
but I think New Zealand
before.
Like fielding is such a big aspect of our cricket.
Yeah,
because other teams don't give a shit about their fielding. Like I'm sure they give a shit, but like
well, they don't, and then they lose.
Exactly.
I mean, like Glenn Phillips was dropped twice by Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka had New Zealand 15 for 3 or whatever it was. Fantastic position to be in. They dropped Glenn Phillips twice. He scores 100. Blackcaps win.
Yeah. These are like it's cricket. Like, and you're going to have performances, games where that's not there. But for New Zealand, that is. It's like Stephen Adams. What is Stephen Adams without Kiwi basketball? Like style. He's like, there's the toughness. His whole shtick isn't there, and I think it's the same with like Kiwis playing cricket. Like fielding is.
It's an identity
exactly
thing.
And,
yeah.
I think that's just massive for them. But interesting thought with Williamson. I'm curious because I'm curious how if this is like a sign of a slump or like he's not quite as good as he wants to be, or if it's more this is intentional. He is like just, and some of it I'm curious about it because of this World Cup, the big scores aren't there. It's harder to score runs in this World Cup, especially the southern states where all the New Zealand play in Adelaide. The semi-finals are in Adelaide and Sydney, finals in Melbourne, I think. So there's more swing, there's going to be more spin, and it's going to be a little bit harder to score runs than the Brisbane, Gabba pitch and Perth, where the Blackcaps lost to England and Brisbane, which I think was a bit of a factor. And I'm curious, like if Kane Williamson's viewing conditions is a little bit tricky, a little bit niggly, I think he's more willing to play the connective tissue innings because last 2 games, Finn Allen and Devon Conway have been dismissed within 5 overs. So you need to sort out the innings. Like there's no point losing those 2 and then Glenn Phillips, Jimmy Neesham, Daryl Mitchell come and just start blasting boundaries and everyone's all out for 15 overs. Like that's not what New Zealand does either. You got to try and get your full like fielding and just like those type of elements are super important.
Well, the other factor there as well is that the Blackcaps didn't have to win. Like the difference between winning and losing was not the same as the difference between losing but not getting thrashed. And like that was the most important thing because England go level on points with them now and Australia are level on points with them now. But because the Blackcaps didn't get thrashed and because they did thrash Australia in the first game, we've got a much better net run rate than either of those teams. So beating Ireland is still going to see them finish first in the first in the group. Like that's by far the most important thing here. All they had, like what Williamson did was ensure as well. Like I'm not saying this was necessarily deliberate, but in taking the thing innings deep, even if it got away from them a bit with the run rate, it ensured that they didn't have that situation that you just mentioned where you get bowled out inside 15 overs and then your run rate gets destroyed. And then suddenly the good work from the first game against Aussie is undone because it's now a shootout in the final round with 3 teams on similar net run rates. Here, the Blackcaps are well ahead. Like England and Australia feasibly are not going to catch the Blackcaps if all three teams win their last game. Like those two, they're not going to do enough damage. They're going to have to win by like 180 runs or something like that for, I think, Australia to be able to do that. Not going to happen because the Blackcaps got close against England. It didn't let England cover that gap as well. Like that's very, very important factor here. You think it's not just the game; it's the tournament situation too.
Blackcaps are fielding first. Kane Williamson, drop catch, couple fielding errors. He catches the vibe. He sees the Blackcaps are going to lose that game. He can already sense it in the air. So then he's playing run rate chess during his batting innings. I like it. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That is more compelling in defense of Kane Williamson than any defense of Sean Marks, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's because Sean Marks, you can't make a defense of Sean Marks without blaming him for at least some things, because it's true. It's there.
And Kane seems more capable of conjuring some magic than Sean Marks.
Given what he's got to work with, yeah. Because, Sean Marks conjured some magic once upon a time, but he didn't have the same hurdles as he does now, which, yeah, probably some regretted decisions from recent years. I'm sure Williamson regrets some decisions too, but still.
So we've got the T20 World Cup rolling on. The Kiwis also, we've got a big game alert for the Aotearoa Kiwis. They've got a quarterfinal.
Hell yeah.
Against Fiji, and it's been a bit of a slog getting through this group stage of the Rugby League World Cup. As of time of discussion, we do not have a Kiwis team list just yet, although I am fairly confident what the best Kiwis team looks like, but I think it's just quite similar to the actual team that played Tonga earlier this year. Fiji obviously going to be an interesting opponent. Learn nothing from the group stage, so like I'm not even going to try and suggest or break down stuff from the group stage. I just don't think it's worth it. Everyone played, everyone got their legs ticked over. Everyone wants to play international rugby league. You want to play these games. The players want to play these games. These are epic moments in UK stadiums. It's all fun. I think most importantly would have been time on the paddock, training paddock, playing paddock, just getting together ahead of the quarterfinal. And obviously that's the case for every team. Going to be interesting what happens with Samoa wildcard. I am tracking that because I wasn't too high on Samoa to start the World Cup, and I'm just curious what happens there. But Kiwis, I think everything from my preview to the World Cup stands. Is a strong defensive emphasis that I think can be crucial in defeating Fiji. Michael Maguire is a massive defensive coach. I think that players are taking pride in their defense, and that's going to be a major factor. And you've got Brandon Smith, Joey Manu, and the most running halves in the world. No halves combination in the NRL, or possible halves combination, or just any pairing of halves, runs the footy as well as Dylan Brown and Jerome Hughes. And I still believe that spine combination and their running ability is what will win this game and probably the World Cup, maybe. Obviously tracking that take as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they do win the World Cup, then I would imagine that's going to have to be like a decisive factor. So if you look at it from that angle, yeah, for sure. I am, first of all, wanting to see them get through a quarterfinal, is particularly because of this. Well, I'll put it this way. Where are we? The 18th of November 2017. I looked it up. 18th of November 2017 in Wellington. The Kiwis played against Fiji in a Rugby League World Cup quarterfinal. And everyone remembers from the Kidwell World Cup, people seem to remember the loss to Tonga most of all. The the 4-2 loss to Fiji in the quarterfinals was by far worse. Like, it was considerably worse as a result. They didn't score a try in a knockout game against a team that they probably should have beaten. I mean, Australia then beat Fiji 54-6 in the semi-finals. So there's your highlight there. This is a revenge game for the Kiwis. I don't know how many players are still around, but there'll be a few that were involved in that game 5 years ago, probably still feeling a fair bit of embarrassment about how that went down. And here is your opportunity to make complete amends potentially and set up a semi-final, probably against Australia again in the next round a week later, supposing they get past Fiji. It's just like, the thing is, that game shows that you can't take anyone lightly. At the same time, we expect the Kiwis to be able to beat this team. They're much better on paper. They should be stronger, in a far better situation than they were 5 years ago. And that could be a nice cathartic thing of like exercising the demons, like the last remaining demons from the previous World Cup sort of thing, and showing like, because there's not much, as you said, there's not much you can gain through the group stage other than arguably more important is what you do off the field and just setting things up and preparing for this stage when the knockout games come along. I'm quite excited about this. Like I'm quite excited, even if they ordinarily you don't get excited if a quarterfinal of a World Cup ends up in a big victory for one team or the other. But if that were to happen here, I'd enjoy that because I've seen what the alternative looks like and it wasn't pretty.
Moving from fear to love, wildcard.
That's it.
And you think about the New Zealand Rugby League fan, it's all fear. Like, because you've got that was a World Cup in Aotearoa.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that point.
Like some of the worst Aotearoa Kiwis footy ever was played on Aotearoa soil. Meanwhile, the Warriors stink. But meanwhile, there is an incredible wave of talent in Australian teams that no one really seems to want to embrace and love because they don't, like, it's all about the Warriors. And you work through a lot of those emotions, you work through a lot of those feelings, and you come out here when a 2022 World Cup and no Warriors are going to be playing in the quarterfinal. But it's going to be one of the best Aotearoa Kiwis teams ever assembled. Brandon Smith, most important player. I can see how Jerome Hughes, like his influence is massive. He came in for the game against Ireland, and yeah, it's like you get your starting halfback into any team, it's going to be crucial. Let alone the combination with Dylan Brown, where they can both easily average 100 meters running. But if Brandon Smith's running first, and we've talked about the Brandon Smith scoot out of dummy half, followed by the Joey Manu scoot out of dummy half. Okay, so Brandon Smith might scoot out of dummy half. He might score a try. That's a realistic possibility when Brandon Smith scoots out of dummy half. He might get a try assist because he makes a break. He passes to someone else. He might make 15 meters. He might make 10 meters. All those possibilities are also present for Joey Manu, who's taken the next run, or he's scoring the try from the try assist. After those two plays that are both among the best attacking weapons in rugby league, Brandon Smith and Joey Manu scooting out a dummy half, after that, the ball is going to Dylan Brown or Jerome Hughes. And I think that combination is going to be crucial because it all starts around the ruck. And if you're dragging defenders all over the place in the ruck and you're skittling bodies or getting an offload out like Joey Tapine, Fisher Harris, Asafa Solomona, they're all going to be wreaking havoc with the footy as well. So there's dummy half chaos. You're creating offloads, that's a bit chaotic. You're skittling bodies as well, that's chaotic. What happens out wide? Overlaps, space. And just that combination, I think, is going to be too good for Fiji. Obviously, the fear element here, wildcard, is present with the Blackcaps because we've identified Blackcaps' softness. And if they slip up against Ireland, suddenly a world-class T20 outfit is sharing the same softness of their test team, of their ODI team as well. And if the Kiwis lose a quarterfinal to Fiji again, no demons have been exercised, wildcard. Those demons are
multiplying. Yeah.
What are the blokes off Harry Potter? The demons, the Dementors.
The Dementors.
Yeah. They're attacking Hogwarts. That is the level of demon status in this example. And you got to, I think what I'm mindfully working towards here, wildcards, you got to work through the fear. You got to embrace the fear side of these things to get to the love.
Well, that Ram Dass quote was about like living in a, I've shut it down now, but like living in a transformative state sort of thing. So it's like embracing change and evolution in order to go from fear to love, right? So whatever's happened between 2017 and 2022 for the Kiwis, that's your transformation. That's supposed to be the journey from fear into love. We'll see how that goes on the weekend, right?
It would be so bad if, like, because right now I can just brush aside all those group stage games. I can say,
yeah,
none of it matters. Like, all that matters is the quarterfinals. They got themselves there. Test footy's a bit weird. It's a bit different. It's a bit quirky. It's a bit, and interestingly, like what happened in the 2017 World Cup semi-finals and finals. I think the final was won like 4-2.
6-0.
6-0. And semi-final, like England, Tonga?
20-18 to England, and then 54-6 to Aussie over Fiji in the other semi.
Fiji only defeated Kiwis like 4-2 though, right?
Yeah, 4-2. Football score, 4-2.
So these big games could have a bit of that. Like, it's not state of origin. International Rugby League is different to state of origin. It is a bit weird. It's not necessarily, I think state of origin is like peak rugby league. Just physicality, skill, everything is peak rugby league. But test footy is test footy. It's international rugby league. From that aspect, like culturally, it's better. But the footy is just different, I think. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And that I think that favors the Kiwis. Because they'll have better kicking, they'll have better defense, and the threat around the ruck, although Fiji do have Coruscant, who's quite crafty, and they've got weapons like Taruva's it's all, Fiji are quite good, but I think kicking game and defense are going to favor the Kiwis in that matchup if it does turn into a grindy affair.
Yeah, Tonga's quarterfinal of that World Cup as well was 24-22 over Lebanon. So there were a lot of close games there, and even the semi-final Aussie Fiji is sort of, from memory, that was like Fiji had played their final the week before and beating the Kiwis, and they just didn't really believe they had anything against Aussie, and I don't think they turned up with half the same confidence or execution or all those kind of things. That's kind of how it goes. And kind of understandably as well, because they just had the biggest win in their like rugby league history. So I can get that. They weren't going to do it again, but yeah, that's what happens in these tournaments, isn't it? The games are closer than you expect, and therefore the margins for error are bigger than you ordinarily would have. Like, you just got to be aware of that going into these things. It doesn't matter if you win by 30 points or if you win by 2 points. You just have to win.
The New Zealand Breakers, Aotearoa Breakers, they have had a week off. They're just kicking back, probably in Auckland, enjoying a bit overcast today, a bit muggy. So that's just a beautiful aspect of living in Auckland in the upper northern reaches, is the tropical humidity in summer and fabulous sunshine. Like, shout out to the sun. It's a bit of Kiwi summer, Auckland and New Zealand, the whole Aotearoa, summertime, sun's out, fabulous.
In the National League game this weekend, Melville went down to play Christchurch United, and the local commentator was going on about how like hot and steamy it was, and they did pre-match interviews with both the both the coaches asking about like the heat is how's this going to be a factor in the game, and then they're like it's 22 degrees here in Christchurch, it's sweltering. I'm thinking 22 is, especially at this time of the year, 22 degrees is not nothing. That's a relatively toasty game, and actually on the artificial surface as well, it's an artificial turf, you feel the heat way more. So it's legit. But also I thought it was funny that it was like it's not exactly like the fiery depths of hell when you consider Melville and Hamilton probably experience a lot of 22-degree days during the summer, and it gets worse the further north you go as well.
Quick tangent. What's your status update on the football pitches around Aotearoa? Any observations on the quality of artificial surfaces? Are there more or less artificial surfaces? Just
well, I went to a game earlier in the year at Seddon Fields when Western Springs were playing Canterbury, and that they've relayed the artificial turf there at Western Springs, which is nice because it was an absolute disaster last time. You do have some nice, like I think Medill's Farm in Eastern Suburbs looks a bit nicer these days. Like some of the Wellington grass pitches are really nice. I don't think any National League game should be played on artificial surface unless necessary, like due to weather kind of reasons, which did happen this week. There was I was in town for the Auckland Half Marathon, so I went to watch the Auckland United versus Auckland City game. Left my umbrella in the car because it was a little bit overcast, but it wasn't anything drastic. 13 minutes into the game, unlucky 13. Crash of like flash of lightning in the distance, crash of thunder, poured with rain, absolutely drenched the field. Incredible game that too. Auckland United won 3-2 against Auckland City. They're the only team to beat Auckland City at all this year, and they've now done it twice. But it rained real heavy, and then the Auckland United women were supposed to play there the next day, and it hadn't stopped raining in between. Like it's pouring with rain Sunday morning too, so they were like, "Well, we're gonna have to play this somewhere else." So they went to an artificial. I think they actually played at Seddon Fields. Come to think of it, it's the second time this has happened to the Auckland United women's team. Actually, they also had to play a game in Ellerslie because Keith A Park was flooded. So, but I mean, the grass pitches are nice. Like they're in a better state than they were last year, where I think a lot of councils had sort of ignored them during lockdowns and things that got in Australia. The good grass pitches are nice. The artificial surfaces, I think, are substandard in general, just as a concept is substandard for playing National League games, but they're better than they have been, I suppose.
Fabulous. We'll swing it back around to the football pocket of the podcast, but we do want to touch on the Breakers right now. They've had a good start to the NBL. We're learning about Breakers basketball, and it's going to be a fun Sunday Ava. You got Breakers and Phoenix Sunday Ava, I believe, and the Breakers are going to be playing Sydney Kings, who are tied with the Breakers with 6-2 records to start this season. Breakers have slightly more, they got a point advantage. So Sydney Kings are second, Breakers are first in the NBL. My observation, Wildcard, is that there's just it's just good to see a Breakers identity, a Breakers gritty, grindy team that I think encapsulates Aotearoa sport, like talking about Kane Williamson and like the Blackcaps, sorry, and elements of Kiwi sport that are present in a lot of these teams. I think the Breakers have found that. No surprises when you find that. And this is different to like the key is we under David Kidwell. He tried to find it and it wasn't there. Michael Maguire's actually found it. Michael Maguire, my mind just went on a weird detour because old Kidwell was working with Argentina rugby.
Yeah, I was going to say, he found the we with them.
Yeah. Nosotros.
Yeah.
Breakers versus Sydney Kings. Defense grit. I'm enjoying that element. I think it's a combination of like the players, all the players, the Aussies, the Kiwis, the American imports, even the French superstar, number 1 draft pick, Victor Wim.
We might be if they keep winning.
Rupert. He's a long body. Like he's got the tools to be a good defender. So it's like everyone's got the tools to be a good defender, and they're willing to be good defenders in a system, which I think is really important when you're talking about imports. Because some of those imports don't want to do all the hard stuff. They, any import, any overseas pro, they're more inclined to do the razzle dazzle. But if you can get imports who can buy in defensively, I think it helps a lot. And from that foundation, you just got to make some shots. And they've got a lot of different shot makers. Their big men can shoot, except for Pardon, because he's busy getting rebounds. But you got Brantley shooting, Rob Lowe can shoot, Vodanovic can drop at the odd three. And I've got a lot of those kind of Vodanovic, Brantley, Rupier, McDowell White's kind of tall, Glidden's kind of tall and good defender. Liafa's a bit smaller, but he's rugged, he's ruthless. So
yeah, he's fast too. So
the combination of just like a bit of an identity and players just willing to go all in on the plan and the system that old Modi Maua is operating.
Yeah, and I think even beyond the system, the fact that you've got players playing hard defensively, including, as you say, the imports too, I just think that's a great sign for a coach. If you've got players bringing the intensity, bringing the energy, and not shirking the defensive stuff, not just being like, who cares? We'll take this play off. The guy, he beat me for the first step. What do I want to chase him back for and risk a foul? I'll just shoot a three next time and make up for it, sort of thing. Like none of those cut and corner attitude issues. Like they actually do seem to be pretty locked in defensively, and it's working really nicely. They're not conceding hardly any points, and I haven't seen that from the Breakers for at least a few. I don't think we ever saw that under Dan Shamir. And so there was like a big question mark with Modi Maor taken over from Shamir of being like, well, you had this like sort of 3-year period, which was the worst in the club's history, pretty much. Like there was one season, the first season, they were all right down the, like they only just missed the finals by, I think, like 1 win or something like that. Or they got close that year, got consistently worse every year after that. And you cannot only blame the pandemic because other teams were affected too, not to the same degree as the Breakers, but like, I mean, it's a Wellington Phoenix, if you want to take a different thing. They didn't seem to find the same excuses. They didn't seem to dwell on that kind of stuff. So it was, and also you could just see, like, you could see the ways in which those rosters weren't very well organized and weren't very balanced, and there were dramas off the field and things like it's obvious. You can't just blame the pandemic for that when everything's gone wrong as well. So never saw that under Dan Shamir. And so the worry was that, like, if you replace him, but then you just hire his assistant, is like, and they never even fired Dan Shamir. He wanted to go because he wanted to return to his family, which is perfectly reasonable from it. Like, you get that. That's one of those things that could happen to anyone at any time. If you just, there are other things other than basketball you got to consider in your life, right? So, but there's like an alternate reality where he would still be there, and I don't think we'd be seeing the Breakers doing what they are now. And so there's a worry that when you replace that with his assistant, there's just continuity. We haven't seen that. We've seen a different version of the Breakers, despite the fact that the assistants replaced him. So I think that's a great sign of Modi Maor as a coach. I think he's been extremely impressive so far. And it's not that I didn't expect it. It's just that
it's a lovely surprise, pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it was. It's well, I didn't expect it, but it's not that I didn't think it was possible. It's just, yeah, it is a lovely surprise that to see how successful he has been from the outset, and I think that's shining through in the performances of the players. And I just think you can overthink stuff in a league like the NBL quite easily and try to be the smartest team. But I mean, we talk about the Kiwi basketballing identity a lot. Aussie basketballing identity isn't that far off. You look at the kind of players that they're serving up to the NBA, but also you just look at every other Australian team is going to have a certain amount of Aussie battlers in there, and those guys may or may not be good shooters. but they're going to be good defenders. Like you can trust that. The average Aussie battler in opposition NBL team is going to want to play hard and defend well. If you don't have that baseline in this league, you will not go anywhere. That's just like that's been proved. You can't just expect to be the smartest guy in the room. Our play calling is too good. Like no one's going to be able to keep up with us, no matter how good defensively they are. It's like it doesn't work. You have to have that baseline of being a good, solid defensive core with buy-in from across the board from your players. And the Breakers seem to have that this year. So whether they can maintain this level of performances, I'm still skeptical, but I'm also far more than being skeptical. I'm just like excited to see that they're playing the way they should be playing and the way that, reigniting a few sort of core values that the team had when they were winning championships.
Moving into Phoenix, I think the Breakers and Phoenix share an interesting idea or wrinkle. There is a difference between idea and wrinkle in my mind. A wrinkle with their depth. Like the Breakers have pretty good depth. Like old Timmins is sitting on the bench. He's not going to play much. McNaught is also down on the bench. He's not playing much. Both of them are serviceable options for the Breakers. And
particularly defensively.
Yep, that's a good depth to have as well. But then you look at like the guard position, you've got a couple of different options there as well. And then you've got different options in the big man zone. Like if Pardon's unable to get much game time, you can rock with Rob Lowe a little bit more. Like there's just a little bit of depth in a lot of positions. That is good depth because they are also willing to play their roles and fit into the system. And then I'm thinking back to that Phoenix win or draw. Sorry, sorry to get your hopes up. Yeah, sorry to get your hopes up, Phoenix fans. You still don't have a win there. And I was actually kind of interested to see the ladder here, Wildcard. You referenced this on the Variety Show. Phoenix are loitering down in 9th. Which doesn't feel like it's the case. Like as you said in the Variety Show, I feel like the Phoenix are a lot better than 9th. But their draw against City with this whole 5 sub thing, that still caught me off guard. But you just see like Ufuk Talai, the coach, he just brings on 3 players. He's going to bring on 3 players in 1 sub. Maybe there were more that I missed, but he just rotates the line, screw a couple goals, you're back in the game. So like for both teams, I think there's enough depth where you can cover injuries, you can cover any suspensions, but you can also throw different looks at the opponent. I think there's multiple ways for the Breakers to defend. There's multiple ways for the Breakers to score points as well. There are multiple options for the Phoenix with how they want to play their footy based on which players are on the field, because I imagine it's going to be quite different playing with whether it's Ben Old, whether it's Kraev, whether it's Mr. Ball, let alone the difference between having Clayton Lewis and Ugarkovic in the midfield, because Clayton Lewis, like both of their passing and their like through balls down the field are delicious. If you take that away, you're bringing in another player who offers a different skill set. Like they might not work as well. They might not be as good at players, but there's still a decent level of performance there, whether it just looks different. Let alone the impact of Costa Barbarouses and him coming on the field and how he interacts with Ben Waine, and then Ben Waine playing with another striker, or Ben Waine just playing by himself up front. Like it's all, or you swap out Ben Waine and you get in Zawada. That's his name, right? Zawada?
Oscar Zavada.
It's a W in the middle, right?
It's a W, but it's one of those Eastern European, sounds like a V things.
So he's a bit of a bigger body. So he's just slightly different to Ben Waine. So there's depth there. And I think that's crucial for both teams in being successful over the course of the season, flowing into specifically the Phoenix here. hot start for the Breakers, and it's interesting just comparing them. Like hot start for the Breakers, seemingly mediocre start for the Phoenix. But I don't feel differently about the two teams. I actually feel quite similar, pleasantly surprised or just like eager, a bit of anticipation for their seasons.
Yeah, where are we here? Well, that doesn't seem right, but according to the thing, they got like 4 home games in a row coming up. Hence I paused, was confused by that. But I think there's something of a World Cup break in the middle of that as well. So that's probably why. But Macarthur on the weekend, any home game the Phoenix play is a game they should at least be hoping to win. Away games can be a lot trickier. And there you settle for a late comeback draw against Melbourne City. Absolutely. Like that's a fantastic result in that case. Home game against Macarthur, then a home game against Western United. Then there's about a month off until they have a home game against Western Sydney and a home game against Adelaide. And then on Christmas Eve, they play away to Perth, which is always a difficult trip. But I mean, 3 draws and a loss from their first 4 games, and they're sitting, I think, like second to last on the table or something like that. They win 2 of their next 3. They're probably going to be like 4th or 5th. Like it hasn't been the start where they've like cashed in on victories and goals and all these things yet. But it's sort of like, tell you what, it's been a Kane Williamson inning so far, setting things up, being a little bit slower than you probably want to be, but still within the range to where your sluggers can come in afterwards and put things away. So if the Phoenix win their next couple games, suddenly that record looks fantastic. Like if you've played 6 games and you've got 9 points and you've only lost once, you're in a pretty good place to kick on for the rest of the season. It's technically probably still does count as one of those slow starts for the Wellington Phoenix, but at least they're getting draws and not losses, which has often been the case at the start of the season before. They'd be losing games early on. Here they're drawing games early on. And even in the one that they lost, they were much better in the second half. It's like there has been a concern the last 2 games, I think, the 2 away games that they've played, bad first halves. And bad first halves that involve errors that have led to goals and stuff. So there's stuff to work on there. But the fact that they made responses within 90 minutes, I think it tells you, again, that the depth is good, as you say. Like the depth is strong enough to change the course of a game when Tele goes to his bench. It also tells you that the mentality is good. And they've got the same kind of intangible stuff that we're talking about with the Breakers, like those kind of values of like we don't accept it when we're subpar. Like we respond to this, we react and improve things. And sometimes you get caught off guard, but the key is that you have that response. I think we've seen that from the Phoenix. And I think it does take a win or 2 because they could lose their next 2 games and suddenly, yeah, this is a terrible start. 3 draws and 3 losses from 6 games looks awful. But when a couple,
smells like fear. That smells like some New Zealand football fear.
Yeah, well, let's transform it into some love then and say they win their next 2 games and then they're in a great position. And that's exactly what Kane Williamson was planning when he laid the platform so that Mitchell and Neesham and Phillips could finish the job off with the Blackcaps. Assuming that they do that, then it's been a perfect innings from Williamson to set it up, right? Like that's the outcome determines the like justifications and whatever, but it's maybe not the best way to judge things, but it's kind of unavoidable. There's been, I'm positive that they can get those results, I guess, is the most important thing.
National League here, just to provide a different thought process in National League football, I'll get you out of your little hot minute segments, but what is a theme or trend that you've spotted in the National League, whether it's a different one in the men's and women's, or if there's something across the men's and women's National League, apart from some good quality artificial pitch talk? What are some themes and trends in National League footy?
In a single word, I would say gold. It's. I don't think. I reckon my brain's a little bit, but I don't think there was a single clean sheet on the weekend in the men's or the women's. The women's had there was a 1-1 draw in one of the games. I think Northern and Southern 1-1 draw. Southern is sort of bucking the trend a little bit of being a strong, sort of tightly wound defensive team, getting them some good results too. But Eastern Suburbs and Western Springs have been winning a lot of games this year. Like they've put space out between them and the rest of the field by scoring heaps of goals. There was a 9-3 result in the women's competition this week. 9-3. Auckland United beat Central. That game was nuts. I think Ruby Nathan had she scored the first 2 goals and then she ended up getting 4 assists as well, which I think I'm the only one who keeps a tally of who gets assists and whatnot. But it's nice addition to be able a wrinkle, shall we say, to be able to add to my to my coverage stuff. So I think Nathan now is leading the entire league in terms of assists, having played only 3 games out of 7 because she was away with the under-17 World Cup team, and she's been teammates with Millie Clegg at Auckland United, at under-17 World Cup, at the under-20 World Cup. I think probably overshadowed by how good Clegg has been in scoring in all of those competitions. Millie Clegg, it sounds like, probably going to sign with the Wellington Phoenix, which is beautiful because I've been saying that this is exactly the type of player they should be trying to sign. If I could have a month ago or whatever, if I could have said pick 2 players who I think the Wellington Phoenix should sign, absolutely, no doubt about it, like the 2 best options they could have from the National League, I would have said Michaela Foster, who's the best player overall, and Millie Clegg, who's the best prospect overall. Sounds like they're going to get both of them. So that's great. Either Natalie Lawrence has been reading my work or I just had good ideas that the smartest people who know what they're talking about and have the inside yarns also agree with. So either way, there's validation there. But yeah, Ruby Nathan got a nice little spotlight there without Millie Clegg in the last couple of games and has been fantastic. So another top tier attacking prospect coming through, involved in a lot of goals. And then you look at the men's competition on the weekend, there were 32 goals scored in 5 games. There was a 5-3 win. There was I think 2 5-2 wins, couple 3-2s. Not only did no team keep a clean sheet, but every single team conceded at least twice on the weekend. So defense was optional. And you had you had the hot, sticky, sunny weather in Christchurch. You also had the absolutely pouring down thunderstorm weather in a couple of those Auckland games. Wide variety of that, but the one consistent was that goals were scored across the board. And I mean, what more do you want to see, basically? To turn up to see a local football game, you want to see some goals. Well, the National League is delivering that in abundance so far this season.
We will finish with Marco Rojas, who is a champion in Chile. And what's the status on open goals? If you hit one from halfway into an open goal, as Marco Rojas did, now I'm not specifically referencing the Colo Colo celebration because understandably he's a hero in Chile and they won the championship and it's just all around good vibes for all parties involved, but that's not like a spectacular goal, right?
Well, it's a pretty good goal.
Pretty good.
It's definitely I would say it's not the best goal. It's probably not even top 3 best goals I saw this weekend. I mean, there was at least 3 goals in the national. Look at Sam Mason-Smith's one on the weekend for Miramar Rangers, where he scored from a very similar side, but the opposite side of the field, a very similar distance, but the opposite side of the field, with the goalkeeper in place, chipped him from the sideline pretty much. That goal was unreal. I saw that and it was jaw hits the ground.
Is it a hot take for me to say a goal where you defeat the goalie is better than a halfway goal where there is no goalie?
I don't think that's a hot take at all. I would argue that from the situation that Rojas was in with that goal, I think a player of his caliber expects to be able to hit an open net from 40 yards out, even if he is close to the sideline. Like, he might miss. It's not a sitter by any means, because it's a lot of ground to cover with that kick, and you are under a bit of pressure. You are on the run as you hit it, but you still. So it's not like 100% chance, but it's better than a 50% chance if you're Marco Rojas. If you miss that, you're disappointed with yourself. And if Sam Mason-Smith misses that chip from the sideline, I don't think he's disappointed with himself. I think he's thinking like, damn, that was close, man. Look, I nearly scored an incredible goal. He's excited about the opportunity. The fact that he scored it means even more so. I mean, I'd chuck in as well the Jana Niedermayer goal in that 9-3 game for Central, where she hits like a spinning volley on the turn, swings that one in for Central. It's a consolation goal. But like, the degree of difficulty to hit a ball that's dropping out of the air when you're not even facing the goal as it's landing, like you got to hit blindly towards where you think the goal is, because you don't have time to react otherwise. That's a better goal too. Like, that's an incredible strike. That was amazing. And then I'm looking at, like, I don't know. I just didn't. The celebration that the Colo Colo dudes had was not in response to Rojas scoring the greatest goal anyone's ever seen. It was because it was the last kick of the game and they were about to get their championship trophy, pretty much, and all their medals and whatever. I think it's more to do with the fact it was the icing on the cake kind of moment, because it wasn't, the degree of difficulty wasn't nothing, but it wasn't also through the roof or anything.
Yeah, so I'm just like, from someone outside of football, I'm just trying to break down the level of goals. Because like I might hit 2 out of 5 from halfway into an empty net. Like, obviously no pressure, no one chasing back or anything. But like, as a not even an amateur football player, like I might be able to hit an empty net. Like, that's possible. So I'd expect a professional player to be able to hit an empty net. Like that.
Yeah, particularly a really good professional player. It's been like the best player in the Australian League before. Like, yeah, I'd have been disappointed if he didn't score that kind of goal.
Why? I think so. I'm thinking like, what? Marco Rojas kind of seems beloved already, and I haven't watched him play any footy for Colo Colo, so I don't know if he's like doing some Stephen Adams mahi to endear himself to the real hearty local fans. But then you drop some information about his off-field matters, and like, it just seems like a really unique situation where everything's just in alignment and just fabulous. Because you don't get the Kiwi footballer going to South America. That doesn't happen. Obviously, a lot of Latinos and South Americans come to Aotearoa to play football, but the South America isn't really a professional option for Kiwi footballers. And the one dude, like, obviously he's got Chilean heritage and all that, we know that, but like, the one dude who goes to South America to play football is also like, he's building some mana. Let's just say that he's building some Chilean mana in the space of like 6 months. And I think it's just interesting. I don't know, like, can you elaborate on just like his mana within that Chilean footballing culture?
It does seem to be pretty significant. Like, I think he is beloved at this point already. And I have watched a lot of his games, and it's not like he's stood out. It's not like he's been the best player on the field. He's only made like one start for them in a league game anyway. I think he started a cup game as well. It's not purely because of what he's done on the pitch. That there's been a lot of positive alignment that's helped him out there. I think the timing of scoring the goal, that it didn't clinch the title, but it was like the icing on the cake of the title celebrations, as I was saying, like the last kick of the game before they get their trophy. He scores a runaway goal. They were 1-0 up. The other team had sent their goalkeeper forward to try find an equalizer. They clear it. He runs away. He scores from nearly halfway. Great moment. Everyone celebrates, and that celebration continues directly into medal ceremony, trophy presentation. Probably hasn't stopped since, to be fair. Like, just being in the right place at the right time helped him. I think also the fact he joined at a time where they'd already done a lot of the hard work in terms of winning the title, and he set up a goal to help win I think he set up the winner in his debut off the bench. Hasn't played a lot, it hadn't done a huge amount otherwise. Like, he hadn't scored a goal to this point, playing sort of six or seven times. As I say, mostly as a substitute. He's been a regular enough presence. He's been a solid contributor in terms of just doing a job off the bench and being another attacking option. I do think the novelty factor of what you're saying about, like, we don't see a lot of New Zealand players, it's like not really an option to go play professionally in South America. I think that's helped him too. I think there's been a novelty factor from the Chilean fans of being like, this guy's a New Zealander and he's playing for us. Like, what's going on? You even see when the dude scores, when Rojas scores, the dude in the commentary box. I'm sure there was a big like goal thing going on afterwards, like you always get. It might have even got a golazo. I'm not sure. But the first thing you hear is them as Rojas shoots, he's like, Kiwis. I think that's part of it. But also, yeah, that thing about the off-field stuff. There was a little article on one of the Chilean papers about this. Like, the first thing he did, apparently, he's like joining the club. He's getting there. He's getting acclimatized. He makes a point of asking about the women's team, like to get to know what the setup is like, the integration between the men's and women's teams. I'd say probably fair to suggest that in South America, women's football is not given the same resource as you're starting to see in European terms, especially. I think it's still a bit behind that. So that's quite a progressive move from Rojas to do, not only ask, but to, like, he went and attended a training session. Actually, since that came out, he was one of about 3 or 4 players from the first team who went and took the trophy, like the championship trophy, took it to a women's game, or might have been a training session. I'm not sure what they were doing. They only showed the behind the scenes clip from what I saw, but that hasn't stopped. He also asked straight away about like what the club does around the community, and ever since then he's been helping out, like personally going along and helping out with food drives for the local homeless community. And that's not just lip service of asking like, what do you guys do? Oh, okay, here's a check. Oh, I don't mind giving a bit of, like, he's given his time and energy to helping that kind of thing out. So I think that was all very endearing, especially when people hear about it at a time where he's just scored a famous goal. And the vibes have never been brighter when you've just won the championship. It was the first time in 5 years. And this is a team that calls themselves the Eternal Champions. So 5 years without a title is quite a long time. That's like, I don't know. There's a lot of things that have aligned right for him. He's sort of, and it's cool to see, because I think the first time he went to Europe, both times he went to Europe, in fact, he never got that. Like, he never got the alignment where I think he went to Stuttgart and broke his foot early on, and then ended up only being able, like, missed all preseason, not really considered in the team, got to go out on loan, plays a little bit the reserve team. Managers are going in and out. The Stuttgart got relegated around that time. He did do all right when he went to Switzerland. I think people forget that. His time in Switzerland was quite good. But then that was only on loan. That ends. He goes back to the A-League, goes to Holland, where he's in and out of the team, doesn't get a lot of opportunities, moves to Denmark briefly. And then I think he cut that short, sort of his decision to go back to Australia instead. He just wanted to go back. So he never really got a break when he played in Europe throughout several different countries in his career. All that, like, karmic resonance, or whatever you want to call it, just come flooding out as soon as he goes to Chile. Like, everything's gone right for him in that way, and it's cool to see, because I think he's one of those dudes who deserves it.
What's his, like, how long is he? Is it just a 1-year deal, or is it 2 years? What's his status there?
I can't remember, but it was at least an 18-month contract. So he's definitely under contract for next season as well. It's not just the second half of this season. It's also definitely next season. I expect there's a club option or something on top of that. So if he continues on the way he's going, and there is one more game left this season as well, so he might add another goal next week. I would suspect, yeah. I mean, just put it this way, like, what he's done so far, they're loving him and they want to keep him around. So if that continues, then I don't think he has to worry about his first contract, because I think there'll be a second one coming sooner rather than later.
Did he play against Australia?
No. I think he
not?
stayed back because it was very soon after he had first signed in Chile, and it was sort of like I'm still getting my bearings off the field here, and I kind of don't want to take a week and a half away from that. I want to like live. I mean, the cool thing is I've sent straight after that game, he got man of the match, right? Straight away interview. That means you get like a little novelty check on the sideline, and then you do a TV interview. I saw him do another interview after the trophy presentation. He's doing fluent Spanish both times. Like he speaks fluent Spanish. We already knew that because when we played against Peru in the Intercontinentals 5 years ago, the cycle before last, he was the dude that the Peruvian media was talking to as like the translator. It's the dude who spoke Spanish. But that's also pretty cool as well. It's like the foreign player who already knows the language and can do full interviews and all that. I do notice though, he does speak Spanish with a Kiwi accent to some extent. Like there's definitely a little bit of that as well. So, but I like that. I like that little the little extra tinge, you know.
Was it like "Sí, gracias, che"?
Yeah, effectively. Not in those words, but you know, you can hear the sort of like the dulled vowel sounds rather than the very expressive and whatnot that you tend to get from the particularly in like South American football communities.
Reminds me of there was a yarn, NRL.com yarn, and Brandon Smith was quoted in it, and he was talking about the 2017 World Cup because obviously NRL media, they're aware of the Fiji quarterfinal thing as well, and he just says like, yeah, I was watching that game against Fiji, and I thought, that's not it, bro. It just perfectly sums it up. Like, that's not it, bro. That was, so yeah, shout out the Kiwi lingo, language, kōrero, slang, accent, and big it up yourself. Big up Aotearoa Sport. Love Aotearoa, love Aotearoa Sport. Busy time, so much happening. So make sure you're tapped in with the email dispatch. More information on Aotearoa Sport there, as well as the website, thenews-case.com. Big it up yourself. Kia kaha. Mauri ora, stay beautiful, chicha.